question. So I actually see brand as a business asset that needs to be managed at the executive level and at the board level. And here is why I'm talking about it in this way. So often when folks say, I need to rebrand, what they have in their mind, particularly if they haven't grown up in the business of brand, which is very important. They're thinking the logo, they're thinking the fonts, they're thinking colors, they're thinking a creative campaign. That's part of brand, but that's not what brand is. Brand, when executed right, is in fact the vehicle that allows for an organization to drive business growth, either within a core audience or an expansion or adjacent audience. And it's also the reason why they're able to have performance that outpaces either market expectations, if you're a publicly traded company, pricing, you can have more of a premium pricing and create a group of people that will talk about you.
Welcome to Sharpen the Spear podcast, where we help manufacturing executives command the front and win the floor. I'm Richard Walsh, creator of the Sharpened Impact methodology, and I spent decades helping leaders transform frontline teams, unlock hidden profit, and capture capacity they didn't even know they had. If you want to see where your leadership gaps are costing you and how to fix them, head over to grittolead.com and run the free Sharpened Impact Simulator today. Let's sharpen your edge and get started. And we are back on STS, Sharpen the Spear podcast with another incredible guest. I've got Cat Holt with us today. And Cat, as we always do on Sharpen the Spear, no one knows Cat better than Cat. So Cat, we need the backstory, bring us up to speed, and then we'll tear into the conversation.
All right, that sounds great. Well, hi, everybody. As you said, I'm Cat Holt, and I'm the founder of a marketing consulting organization called Coology. We actually started this company in September 2021. And so for those of you that are business owners, we're in our 5th year, which is kind of a milestone year. If you make it to 5, you make it longer. And so we're excited to be in our 5th year. A little bit about my background. I'm the single mom of three teenage daughters. It's my hat trick. They equal parts delight me and infuriate me, but I think that's just the situation of being a mom in this day and age. Psychology by background and training, an artist by inclination, a musician, and ended up in this thing called advertising and marketing and branding and communications over 25 years ago. And I have been happily following this meandering path ever since. So I'm really happy to be here.
Oh, that's awesome, Kat. Yeah, it's, because there's marketing and there's branding.
Okay? There is.
And we're going to define those for everybody so they understand, because those get so interwoven and misconstrued on what we're actually working on, everything else. And you've got a ton of stuff on that. So I'm excited to get in that as well. And I'm with you on the child raising. I have 6 children myself, and it's
God bless you.
Upper teens and early 20s. So yeah, it was a fun journey. It was a good time, and it doesn't stop.
No,
as
you're
they
always
say,
a parent.
Yes, they're always on the payroll. So, I put it in the business term, but
paid interns. You don't always get what you pay for, right?
That's right. Or you do get what you pay for. That's the problem. So it works both ways. But yeah, that's awesome. So yeah, let's dive in. Let's just start, just like we said, get marketing branding. Let's put that line down the middle so people really have a clear understanding of what the two things are. Sure. And then we'll talk how they can work together or against each other, or all the fun things that you've been doing for 25 years.
For sure. So the way I think about marketing is that it's the programs, the strategies, and the tactics that businesses use in order to accomplish business objectives with folks that are outside of their organization. And typically you're talking about 2 or 3 main categories of marketing. And you can kind of think about it in terms of the sort of acquisition and retention funnel, right? So you have the kind of marketing that's meant to tell your story so that people are aware of you, and when there's a need, they think of you. That's typically considered these days brand marketing, but I'm going to come back to why That's just one part of what a brand is.
Sure.
Then you have acquisition marketing, which is how do you get people in the front door? How do you engage with them, whether you're B2B or B2C? You still have to do both. And then there's sort of the last part of the funnel, which a lot of people don't always spend as much time thinking about, which is the onboarding and the customer experience and what we often call the reacquisition. In other words, you just spend a lot of time and effort and often money to help people know who you are, to get them to try you for the first time. But then how do you have them coming back? Because that's when your company can actually grow at a sustainable rate and you frankly get a better return on any of your marketing dollars.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, very, very good. So I agree with all that. Okay.
You
So
want to talk
wow.
brand?
Yeah, let's jump into brands. But I just one quick point is like there's a lot to that, right? So marketing to me, I'm like with you, it's customer acquisition.
Mm.
If I put it
Oftentimes,
down
that's
in
the
a
first thing that we think
That's
about.
it, right? Like if I had to pick one
Yeah.
thing to say, that's kind of what it is. Now, there's obviously a million different ways and a million different marketers and all that. I, just for transparency on my podcast, limit the amount of marketers I speak to as guests, okay? Because there are different avenues, right, of marketing and there's different people, but man, it gets muddy.
Hmm.
So it really it's and I'm also trying to go. I haven't had all the best experiences in marketing.
No,
Okay,
I
so
know that's a blessing that is the curse of my day in and day out living for sure.
right,
I
yeah,
know there's a lot of false promises that are made,
yeah, we're not going to go there yet.
but it's acknowledged. It's
But
acknowledged.
yeah, so it's that. So again, I'm a little particular, and that's why I'm excited to have you on because of the experience and the approach and everything else. So let's jump into the brand definition now.
Yeah, and I have a bit of a radical opinion on what brand is. And this is
And
why
that's
I'm
why
also
you're on my
excited.
show.
Yeah,
That's why
that's
you're on
why
my
we're going to have
show.
this conversation. So I actually see brand as a business asset that needs to be managed at the executive level and at the board level. And here is why I'm talking about it in this way. So often when folks say, I need to rebrand, what they have in their mind, particularly if they haven't grown up in the business of brand, which is very important, they're thinking the logo, they're thinking the fonts, they're thinking colors, they're thinking a creative campaign. That's part of brand, but that's not what brand is. Brand, when executed right, is in fact the vehicle that allows for an organization to drive business growth, either within a core audience or an expansion or adjacent audience. And it's also the reason why they're able to have performance that outpaces either market expectations if you're a publicly traded company, pricing. You can have more of a premium pricing and create a group of people that will talk about you. Because what brand really is a way of you telling the story of who you are, what you stand for, and the job you're going to do in people's lives. It's also how you act, how you show up, the actions that you take. It's the experiences that you deliver, and all of those have to feel consistent. And that North Star of those experiences, the way you make it consistent, whether you call it the vision or you call it a BHAG or you call it a value proposition, that's your brand. And it can be measured, it can be tracked, and it can be accounted for in projections. And we're not doing that enough in this day and age. And companies that do it right, they are outperforming all of their peers, and those that make a mistake end up in the front lines and they can lose valuation very quickly. So it's an incredibly important business strategy before it ever becomes a marketing or creative strategy.
Yeah, I love it. And today, when you think about it today, and this is really good, this point you brought up here on the data, the tracking, the measurable, like everything else is.
Hmm.
Okay, why isn't your brand? And this is why I'm really excited to talk to you about this because I don't think people have ever been able to put it into and be able to quantify it. It's all this mystic feeling. It's how people feel when they think about when they and no one has said, well, how do you put a number on that? How do you do that, right? So, and when we're talking before we jumped over to this definition about marketing and the good and the bad and this stuff and the empty promises and this and tying it to ROI or performance or whatever that is, I think you're right on the money and quite a bit ahead of the curve on the valuation add to a business.
Mm,
This is it's a big deal, right? Because you're going to go, if you're going to get acquired, but and
100%.
right, that has to factor in.
Well, let's talk about that, right? Let's talk about M&A because it is everywhere, right? If we think
Mhm.
about startups today, and particularly in this environment that we're working in, where AI startups are a dime a dozen right
Mhm.
now, some of those will be extraordinarily successful. In fact, some of them will become the next Amazon or the next Meta, even though I fully acknowledge that both Amazon, Meta, and other very large, very successful technology brands, businesses, are in fact in the business of AI. Some will emerge and they will be AI specific brands. The reason that you will get purchased at a higher cost is because of your brand name, the reputation, and a promise for future success that you are able to build up in a marketplace because of an ability to understand who you are and the consistency with which you deliver on that brand platform. And that has been proven over and over again. What's interesting is it's not believed as strongly as other proof points of valuations. And that's the trick I think that we're in right now. I hesitate to say it's like the UAP of the business world, but it kind of is, right? Right. We kind of believe there must be something called brand, that it must have some kind of value, but I can't quite wrap my head around it. And there's still disbelief even though experts are coming out and saying it's a real thing. And people have been going and writing papers and showing that there is a major business contribution that comes from brand over and over again. Interbrand has done it with its demonstration that those brands that are in the top quintile from a brand health perspective outperform the S&P 500 over and over and over again. And yet there's still a belief that some of the vehicles, some of the tools that we have as business owners to measure brand are squishy science and not hard science, or squishy math and not hard math. But with anything that's measurable and trackable, you can deep dive into an analysis, you can show causation and correlation, and frankly, you can also track it in the same time pattern to understand when one trends one way, how do some other more trusted measures trend? And if you start doing that on a consistent basis, you can start to see either derived business importance or, frankly, causal business importance. And that's the trick that I think is super important in this day and age because we have a world of abundance. We have access to so much. And the thing that will make a company successful where others fail is going to be their brand.
Yeah, it's a really powerful statement, and that ability to truly quantify this is where it lies, right?
Mm,
Like you said, now as this begins to harden, okay, that's a positive, right? Harden the numbers and get that kind of stuff. Um, it's going to be incredibly valued to every company, right? All the way down.
mm,
You might be a $3 million company, you might be a $3 billion company, and this brand is going to have an effect because even though, numbers are different and everything else, I think it's really important. I've done something similar with what I call the command. I created the command your coefficient. So how do you measure leadership?
right.
Okay. So what I've created the FICO score for leadership.
Yeah. Oh, that's a
Okay.
great analogy.
And it is, I
Mm,
mean, it's
great
new,
analogy.
and what I'm building the company is going to be
Mm,
better have a 5.0 or better, okay?
mm,
Or it's going to cost you millions, okay, for the valuation of your company because that's another thing, right? So I love that you're saying this because I love how you're really diving into real hard numbers. Let's really quantify this.
Yeah,
And that
let's.
takes, here's the thing, and why you're able to do this, Kat, is because you have this deep understanding and experience of what brand is. Like you said, and forget about squishy numbers. People have squishy definitions,
Right, right, right.
so
That's right.
they can't deliver to improve that score. I'm going to put your
Right.
thing in the score, right? So like, what was the challenge in that to really get this definition in place?
Yeah. And so I think what ends up happening is when you're in the land of business, whether it's large corporations or even, mid-market, and I would say the more disciplined small businesses, there is a culture of working within spreadsheets, right? If you can measure it, if it can be tracked over time, if it can be mapped, if it can be evaluated or in some ways decomped, then it must be real. I think what ends up happening is we as business owners default to the things that are easily captured in an Excel spreadsheet that can be decomped. And I was struck by this when, part of my background is I grew up in advertising agencies, branding and digital agencies in the East Coast, so Boston and New York City, and ended up going to run all of marketing strategy for Progressive Insurance for 4 years, from 15 until 2019. And during that time period, it was definitely eye-opening for me because of the fact that brand, though it was stated in all of the annual reports, brand was always identified as top one, two, or three in terms of the factors and the assets that the company and corporation have that will engender confidence in shareholders and investors that the future performance of this company will continue to impress the socks off of them and warrant additional investment. When we went and looked at the measurement and how is that identified, brand was in a category that couldn't be decomped, that couldn't be measured, that probably had other noise that was called all other.
Wow.
It was called all other. And it was broadly acknowledged that brand is in there, but how and what could never be identified. When I went there, there wasn't even a marketing scorecard. Every other business unit had a executive level marketing scorecard, and marketing didn't. Or sorry, a performance scorecard, and marketing didn't. And so I created the first one ever. And it looked at how do you map the degree to which the brand is helping the enterprise deliver on the strategic priorities. And the reality is, every company should have that. And the source of that data is going to come from very different places. And yes, I'm going to tell you right now, having some kind of brand health tracker in some capacity is absolutely A1 critical. And I'll go into why in a minute. But that's not the only way that you can determine the value of the brand. There are other things that you as an organization are already tracking in order to identify the value of the brand. So, for example, almost every single business that I'm aware of, and I can't think of one that is not, but there's probably one out there, has some kind of digital presence. You can take a look at branded search. What is the frequency with which people are typing your brand name in? You can look at what are the other terms that are being typed in during that period. And how does that compare to your competitors? The frequency with which people are typing in your brand name into the Google search bar is 100% a measurement of unaided awareness. It's as valid as going and surveying people and asking the question, when thinking about whatever category, what companies come to mind? Why are those two things so important? Because one of the most predictive measures of future market growth that a company can have before the actual quarterly results are in is the degree to which they've improved their unaided awareness. Because unaided awareness moves before business metrics. It's a predictor of future growth. And that too has been proven over and over and over again. Now, I will tell you, one of the largest, most important drivers of improving unaided awareness is getting your story out there. And oftentimes we have to spend. And so there is a high correlation between improvements in unaided awareness and companies' ability to spend more than their share of market as a reflection of share of voice in a competitive landscape. And so it is absolutely related to the amount of time, effort, and investment that a company makes. But it also is highly measurable. And the minute you start seeing that move, I promise you, the subsequent quarter growth is going to be starting to hockey stick for you. And I think as a business manager, as an owner, being able to have a predictor, a precursor of future growth is super important. So why is that not considered as real as sales numbers and P&Ls? I'm not quite clear on why that would be the case.
Well, I think it's the case because no one is dialed down on this.
Mm,
No one's put it in these terms, right? It's all the feeling. Okay, it's hard
yeah.
to invest in a feeling. Okay, it's it's hard to think like it's put dollars in a feeling. It like because I might feel this way, you might feel that way, but no one has done that. It's kind of like when I'm talking about what I was saying, what I'm doing, leadership. Well, how do
The
you measure
FICO
that?
score. I love
How
it.
how do you measure leadership? You know, you can't unless you're me. Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
No, I can because you install and everything else. But it's really cool. So you're doing a similar thing. This is why I love this conversation. Is like this it and the issue is this is gonna it takes time. You've already taken ground, right?
Yeah,
Because of how you
that's
said,
true.
but it is a this is a long game. But when people, especially with the larger companies, when they start to grasp this, and I think that, like you said, the mid-sized and smaller companies, they need to understand the differentiation in this and how they can develop it at their level, right? Because I mean, and I'm not about I need to be the biggest and the best. I like the best. I'm
Yeah.
all about the best. But I want even I work with a lot of contractors and tradesmen and stuff like that. Own your region,
Yes.
like be the brand. Like someone needs a furnace, they only call one place, and it's you. Okay, because you've done the brand thing, right? Like
And you've built your reputation.
it-
And frankly, now we're talking about how do people make decisions, right? And
right,
when we make decisions, think about your own life. You don't have heat and it's January and it's negative 20 degrees out. Do you want to call the general contractor or do you want to call the person who you know is an expert in fixing furnaces? You want to call the expert. And so you can be a giant among midgets, I suppose, in your category and enjoy tremendous success.
that's right,
Tremendous success. What's interesting is that doesn't feel safe, right? Because it feels like you're walking away from an opportunity.
right,
But the reality is, it's actually the safest bet you can make. And the only time it's not a safe bet is if you've already figured out that in whatever region that you operate in, you're already receiving 80, 90% of all furnace requests and you still want to grow. Now you have to look at adjacencies and
right,
expansions.
right.
But you still have to start from that point of your
Okay.
reputation. So if you're known for keeping things warm and snuggly, then maybe you should be looking at, putting in fireplace units, right? You can, of course, do the opposite, which is cooling, which would be the next,
Right,
which is typically
right.
what you see in the
Yeah,
HVAC situation. But everybody does that. And then are you then somehow watering down your brand? You might find that if you just focus on keeping everything warm and snuggly, that's your brand promise, and we are the best at. You will find other adjacent market opportunities that will continue to have you emerge as the expert in. while also opening up an ability to sell more products or services than you would have otherwise been able to do.
Yeah, it's exactly that. It's not, it's the old adage, it's benefits over features.
Hmm.
It's not about how many BTUs your furnace puts out. It's that you're not freezing to death in 30 below weather in Wisconsin, where I live, and everyone's not wearing three sweaters. Okay, so when I
Yes.
say warm in the house, they're just enjoying that. There's this picture, and you do that with a phone call.
Hmm.
Okay, well, there's a problem like we do it, and that's what you built your reputation on is quick reaction, et cetera, top notch, the whole thing. You can expand that. You
Yes.
can move that brand. You don't have to go figure out a new product. You have the service proven, tested, reputation years, and you just take that and go plop it in there.
Well, and this is exactly an example of when brand becomes a business strategy. Because now my mind is going, all right, you're known for keeping things warm and cozy, right? You've just now successfully extended from furnaces into fireplaces. All of a sudden, you're realizing you've got a ton of folks that are really, really free and not doing very much in the summertime. What do? You can expand into outdoor grills and fireplaces. You could do hot tubs because you're still building your reputation as the warm and cozy people. And now you're thinking about it in terms of having specialty, but not only expanding your product and service offering, but also taking into consideration seasonality, which that is strategic brand management right there. And
Right.
I always say that business owners need to think brand first before they do things like acquire a new company, launch into a new marketplace, go after a different target audience. Because if they don't, and it doesn't work, and they're left scratching their head, for those of us that are strategic brand managers, we're thinking, of course not. You either didn't have brand elasticity, which is this idea that people can believe that you will do something else, or you didn't have relevancy within that audience group. Yeah, you were good for mom and dad, but why would you be good for me? Or they went into something that they weren't good at, and now it hasn't just made that expansion a failure, but it's eroded the trust in what your brand reputation is for your core business. And that is so critical in this day and age because I'm telling you, we are in an always on, always connected world. Lots of things can look really great on paper, but that is not how humans work. It's not how decisions are made. And brand is still one of the major guarantees of future success, or if not managed, a pretty good predictor of a lack of future growth or success.
Yeah, so here's the big thing I love what you're saying here is this. So when you look at brand and then you look at offerings, okay, this is really important, okay, because
It is.
because you could be afraid to go into a new offering because we do this. We're the experts in this, but that puts a low ceiling on your business
It does.
in the grand scale of things, right? So what I love what you said, Kat, is that focusing on the brand, you can with a strong brand, you can introduce new offerings, right?
Hmm.
Because the power they're going to for is the brand, not the offering,
Yes,
right?
it
So they
is.
that's the first level of trust. That's what's going to open the door for them to listen and say, well, they're really good at that. And I'm in the mind of the consumer here. It's just so if they're rolling out this, they're going to be really good at that because their
And
brand is so well established.
what's fascinating for me, having done this for 25 plus years, I have the great honor of being tapped in by business owners, executives, when they are trying to do something that they don't know how to do. My entire career has been that. And so I have been fortunate enough to have a seat at the table to figure out how to get that little nasty little knot untied and clumped up for some extremely important business decisions. And so for me, I already know. I mean, I've helped hundreds of clients, and I already know how big my job is going to be with one question. that I ask of many people within executive leadership in a company that's trying to do something new. And that one question is, what business are you in? And if they come back and said, we are in the business and it speeds and feeds and product, that means it's going to be a much longer journey. There's a great quote. Oh gosh, I can't remember his name. I'll have to text you it. Super, super famous. Most folks that were schooled in old school marketing know this, which is people don't buy quarter-inch drills. What they're buying is a quarter-inch hole.
Yep.
And I think as business owners, as service providers, as product developers, we get so enamored in the
Yep.
thing that we do, we forget that that's not the job that it is doing. And we forget what it is. It's funny because, about, I want to say 10 years ago. I mean, I had the fortune of, I like complicated things. My brain doesn't stop. And so sure, I could sell sneakers and, packaged goods and things like that, but typically I'm in the business of explaining complex or helping to brand intangible because that's when my area of expertise is really needed. And so we were at Google and we were having conversations about the future. And this is right about when they were launching their sort of master brand of Alphabet. And I just sat there and was thinking, I was like, God, man, they really missed an opportunity here. Because if I think about what business is Google in, it's in the business of data. It's in the business of numbers, right? Their entire enterprise has been built on this kind of database intelligence. And so for me, it should have been named numbers, right? It should have been named the thing that it's in the business of. Um, but so often when you go to executive leadership, you will hear them say, we are in the business of, and if it's the head of B2B sales, they'll say whatever it is that they are doing. And if it's the head of consumer sales, it's in the business of that. And if you talk to HR, it's in the business of bringing people in that can do that and doing this culture. And the reality is you're all in the same business and you should all have one story because until you do, you're going to be making day-to-day decisions that are going to bring each of you off track.
Yep.
And it's going to split the understanding of who you are as an organization, and it's going to minimize that valuation index.
Yeah, that's powerful. I think we do it with strategic vision, really understanding the company's vision, and we only do it 18 to 24 months out. Like, what are we trying to fulfill? How do we get everyone in this organization on the same page, working towards the same vision? We're not trying to put A into B and get it to C.
Mm,
What's the real vision of this company? How are they the hero in every part of that journey?
yeah.
Right. Without them, this stuff doesn't work, right? How do you get that buy-in? That's brand awareness, right? That's
Mhm.
understanding what we're actually moving. And I think too many people, like you said, when you compartmentalize what your business does like that, you're back to features,
You are.
not benefits.
And nobody buys a feature.
Nobody does. Nobody does. I tell people all the time, I say, listen, if I buy a car and it's $30,000, okay, I don't not buy it because it's $30,300.
Mhm.
Okay. I buy it because the value is way more than all that. I'm not buying it
100%.
because it's 30 grand. I'm buying it because it smells new, looks new. I look great in it. People will look, it gets me where I want to go every single time, whatever, right? It fits all 8 kids, well, whatever the deal is, right? That's what we get. It's nothing to do with the twin turbo, this and that. I mean, I get people do that, well, sport car, whatever.
And
But
and
I'm
some
saying,
will, right? It's like it's the super involved and there's a name for it, right? If you take a look at the things people care about, follow, want to put the mental effort into, it's a 2x2, which is, one of the dimensions, let's call it the y-axis, is how motivated and interested am I in this thing,
right,
right? High interest, low interest. And then the second, let's call it the x-axis, is how capable, how educated am I? Am I able to understand and make decisions about this? And that's the knowledge access, right? Low to high. If you have high interest and high knowledge, you want to drop into the Hemi. That's where persuasion-based marketing excels. And when you think about, I always say what's old is new again, because I was able to do a lot of high enterprise technology in the dot-com eras, working for companies like Dell and for EMC and, companies that ended up being bought by IBM and Microsoft. I was able to understand this notion of crossing the chasm, which is a way of understanding why tech companies were either successful in continuing to grow or could not actually continue to succeed after its initial growth. And the whole notion is there are early adopters that want to have a conversation. They want to go into the weeds. They are the folks that are highly knowledgeable. They are highly motivated. And then there's everybody else.
Yep.
And when companies can't cross that chasm, in other words, they're translating the value proposition, the brand promise, the reason that you would want to engage in something that's new and novel, they can't translate it to the next group of people who don't want to talk speeds and feeds. They're not going to succeed. It's not because of lack of product innovation. It's a lack of conversational translation. And I
Yeah.
think that is so undervalued because it feels like it's squishy and creative and not measurable. And people don't know how to measure it, but there are ways to measure it. There really are.
I think a really good example of this, I was just thinking of this, is we use the car industry.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, whether it's Subaru or whatever, you got these rally races, and they're all out winning these off-road races and
I
rally
know.
races. But 98% of all people, if not more, will never take that vehicle off-road, but they want to know that it did that. Okay,
It's
now
a
you got
confidence, right? You
right, you
feel like it gives you that extra thing. I mean, look
right,
at
and
Jeep. Most people in Jeep
exactly.
Wrangler aren't off-roading.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah, I had many Jeeps, but and I took it off road. But
Well, then you were one of the few.
exactly, you're the guy, but I won't have ducks on my dashboard either. So I don't get into that, right? But you really see it like you bring your I would call them the geeks, the gearheads, these guys, they're into the high performance, all that kind of stuff. And then if they can then be seen in that vehicle, just like other people, man, they know what it can do. I'll give you a great example. I had a client for decade plus, big hitter, right? Just, I mean, the guy, just multi-billionaire guy. He had over 100 cars. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Every car, he collected all that. Every car he had 500 horsepower and up. He converted
Wow.
everything from Jaguars to whatever, FX35s. So he takes me out to drive one. He goes, come on, you drive. And he's like Mr. Magoo. That's what he looks like. Okay. He's like Mr. Magoo. So, so, he says, come on, get in the car. And I'm driving. Go ahead, punch it. And the thing winds up, man. I'm zooming. Go, okay, slow down here because the police sit up here and stuff. You're like, So we come back, and his name was Gary. I go, Gary, like, I get you got to say, like, where do you go and open these things up? He goes, oh, I never drive over 45. I just want to know I haven't. Okay. And he doesn't. He has a driver who picks him up every day and all this stuff. But he's got all these vehicles. He just loves it. He does this stuff. So there's a guy who's like wants the performance, but doesn't
But
even
isn't
use
ever
it.
taking advantage of it. I
Right.
mean, that's a segment, that's a profile, right?
Right.
And that's a
Right.
know your audience kind of thing.
Exactly. It's just so I love this idea of the cross section, right? You get the vertical and the horizontal. Like, how are you
Yes.
really going to bridge that? Because what you're saying is like, okay, you can have your little niche and your gearheads who will love it and everything else. And there's two things, and I'm being very general here. Most of them couldn't afford the vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because they work, they're not going to buy a new one because they're 120 grand. But at the same time, but the masses will buy at all levels. So the masses will support the high-end racing and all that stuff. That's where they do it. There's an ROI to that high-end investment with professional drivers and tracks and road courses and all this stuff that translate is recovered with the masses because they're
Well, and
driving the car that won the American Le Mans or whatever it is.
that goes to the notion of brand is emotional.
Right.
There is no logical reason why your friend Gary has upgraded every single car in his collection to a caliber of engine that he can't even enjoy on a regular basis.
Right.
Not a logical reason. There sure as hell is an emotional reason.
Right.
because he can. It's a show of success. It's the promise of future adventures and excitement. It's the ability to have bragging rights about a collection that's unique and not available anywhere on earth. That's exclusivity, right? Um, those are all emotions. And the wild thing about brand is that you can actually start to derive the functional, rational, and emotional attributes that you need in order to drive consideration, which is the second measure that's most important and predictive of future market growth. Is next time I'm going to make a purchase, would I consider? And if you're not on that list, you're not going to get a road test if you're a car manufacturer.
Right.
But what I love the most about the world I operate in is I don't believe people when they tell me, why did you buy a car?
Okay.
Right? Because not because they're lying, it's because they are not remembering it correctly. Because are living in an era where you want to look like a decision is informed. And it's a rare, I mean, we will sometimes, I mean, I've done so many hours of focus groups and one-on-one conversations. And frankly, I'll just talk to random people at the bar when I'm trying to figure something out. And I have the great fortune that they tend to open up to me. And I'm like, I
Mhm.
don't know why, but great, let's talk. And they get it backwards because if you look at the research on decision making in psychology, we make emotional decisions and then we go and look for rational reasons to justify it, and that's the order in which we operate. And the reality is that most decisions that are made quickly are as good as those that are considered, and most decision making does not get better the longer you take for it, right? If you're
Yep.
already 80% right, but you take 6 months to fill in the next 10, you're never going to get to 100% confidence. It doesn't change what the decision is. You've just spent more time looking at more information. And frankly, I would argue you're kind of backhoeing in to the rationale for it.
Yeah, I
Um,
think that the great saying is you make decisions quickly and change your mind slowly. That's successful
yes.
people. That's what it
Yes.
is. Okay, they get it. You're 80%, you know, Otterbox. They had
Hmm.
the 80-20 rule. They get something to 80% good, then they release it and let the audience tell them what's wrong and they fix the last 20%.
100%.
They, you know, and this and it and I think also to your point on they get it backwards, like they decide emotionally. I wonder, this is a total speculation, is there almost a level of embarrassment? Like, take me, I'm going to go with the man. I can speak from the man's point of view. Like,
Yeah.
am I
Hmm.
really going to tell you I made this emotional decision about
Oh,
how
for
cool I
sure.
look in this, right? No, I'm going to go to the features.
There
You know, it's
is.
got this and this and this. So I'll lead with that so I don't seem like some fluffy little, little
Yeah.
fuzzy guy, you know?
There is that. I mean, so I think it's both. We don't necessarily recognize when there's an order of operations and decision
Right,
making, because if we've gone through the process of looking for, like, trying to do a side by side comparison, then that was part of the decision making, but did it come first?
right.
Right. And there is point of pride and this notion of what is good decision making in our culture, for sure. So that's true. So what ends up happening though, if you are looking to understand how can you manage brand as an early indicator of future business success, instead of asking people why did you choose X, Y, and Z, where they're going to get it misstated, you don't. Instead, you do essentially a correlation analysis to understand what the drivers of consideration are. So if you are doing something like a brand health study, then you ask people, which are the brands that you would consider next time? And then you look at, when thinking about this brand, what do you think is true of them? Right. And that again has to have emotional, functional, and rational reasons in it. You can mathematically defer the contribution that a person's belief that a company is like X, Y, or Z is likely to then result in consideration through data science and modeling instead of asking people. And now you've got a beautiful little package because presumably you know who you are at this point. You have to do that work. But if you then know that what I'm trying to do is get unaided awareness to where it needs to be, get my consideration to where it needs to be, then I know who I am. But in order to drive consideration, they have to believe these three things about who we are as a company. Because if they believe that, then it is predictable that they will then consider me as a brand. You've got a nice little scorecard for being able to understand not only where is my brand in the world of evaluation, but you're also starting to have the tools in order to improve it. And the last thing I would like to offer to your folks, because we always like to talk about what are things you can actually do. Um, if you are in more than one geography, or if you have more than one audience, you can actually create in-market tests to determine whether or not added spends for things that are brand messaging instead of what we would consider acquisition. Acquisition messaging typically is talking to a person who's in market, is likely going to make a decision in the next day to week. I mean, typically that's the time frame we're talking about. It never goes past 30 days. And so it's the rinse and repeat, you're in the market, you want to show up kind of investment. So you're talking about the things that we know are last mile offers. It's, free this or better than anyone else for a better value, or it's on sale, right? Or, buy one, get one free. That little bit of extra that makes people feel good that they got a little bit more from that transaction from you. The reality is those things don't work if you aren't already in the consideration set.
Mm-hmm.
But the amount of time it takes to build up unaided awareness and consideration is past that month or that quarter or often that calendar year. And so from our modern day accounting, it looks like it's a cost to the business because we haven't started to map how we, from an accounting perspective, uh, take into consideration investments in brand spend in future years, which is funny because as a business owner, we have figured that out in the vernacular of capital expenses.
Right.
Right? And there's no reason that we can't now take that on for the investment an organization makes in order to make sure that there is future success that runs beyond a calendar year. And it does require investment that will not have an ROI in this month, this quarter, or this year. And that is just a fact.
Well, I
And
think what's really interesting, Kat, is I work at tons of businesses, right? No one is allocating for brand spend.
it's
Nobody is, okay? Like they may have some brand or they have an idea that the marketing thing, which we defined in the beginning, they're into that because they can see a 30-day ROI. Okay, they can it's measured easier, but they don't understand the long game, which is you're in your fifth year of business. Okay, you've reached that point, like we said in the beginning, like that's awesome because you didn't think about next year.
Mhm.
Okay, you can't, it's the old adage of people overestimate what they can accomplish in a year and underestimate what they can do in five, right? It's the same principle in this. And this is why marketing and branding get so muddled because people, first, they don't know the difference. And this is really important in this whole
Very good point.
this whole conversation. That's what I want people to understand the difference. It's two lines of development. Okay, it's two marketing rails. Okay, one is your marketing, your 30-day, your 1 week, the now client, all that kind of stuff. They're in that short sales cycle. Branding's not a sales cycle,
Mm-mm.
and that's the thing. They
Branding is
can't.
a business. I'm going to say it again. Branding is a business strategy. It
Right.
transcends marketing.
And like you said, it's an asset.
It is.
Okay, now not that marketing can't be. Okay, but obviously it always begins as a liability. Okay, that pretty much, more so than a brand. But if you don't, I love that you put it in the asset category. This whole thing, right? So now it's a valuation, it's an asset. When people have that understanding, okay, it changes how they approach it. You'll I'm gonna air quote invest in an asset.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now in dependent business, we have depreciating assets, right? You
Yes.
still change the tires, you still tune things up, they got to keep them on the road, right? But it's still an asset, but it's a depreciating asset. A brand is not a depreciating asset.
No, it's an appreciating asset.
Exactly. Every year, every 6 months, every year, every 2 years, every 5 years is a build. Take a 100-year company,
Hmm.
Johnson and Johnson. Procter and Gamble, whoever you want to look at, like, what is that? Right? That's the
Yes.
brand. That is how you can't sell if you remove that name and sold the company, you'd sell it for less.
You
Period,
would
right?
because it's just a collection of products,
Mhm.
operations. You can't even say that you're selling the people because we don't live in a day and age where people work for a company for their entire careers.
Right? That's gone. Long
Hmm.
gone. Right? So this emphasis on brand. I'll give you an example too. A couple decades ago, I had a client and he's talking about, I can't even remember what he actually bought, but he bought it from this company. And the reason I don't remember what he bought it was because he didn't care about, all he talks about is how great the company is and they do this and they give to this. And this is what he said. These guys have all the money they could want. So it's not like they're shopping for it, but he's like, I just felt good doing business with them because they're doing so many
Huh?
good. I've never forgotten that,
It's true.
And for me, I kind of like it felt good, you but at the same time, I'm building things and charging a ton of money. I'm building custom water features. What am I selling? I'm not selling a water. I'm selling tranquility and serenity and this
Yes,
beauty and that they can sit by and have their morning tea and they're doing the whole thing. I go and I just kept testing the market with my price point. I just kept raising the prices like they'll pay anything for this. I
because
go,
what you are selling is the feeling they get,
that's it.
which ironically brings us back to the beginning of the conversation, which is brand is emotion. And emotion can, in fact, be measured. It really can, because if you think, I mean, again, I told you my training is as a psychology major, and you are able to measure up to a point
Mhm.
what emotion is. And there have been a number of phases of trying to predict emotion, trying to measure emotion. People will use eye tracking right now as a emotion of intent or interest. You can look at dilation of pupils because is a group of folks that grew up in a form of science that really took hold in the 50s as the best way to do science is to have a test and control type of framework where it's repeatable and can be proven or
Observe.
demonstrated over and over and over again. And so even psychology has a science, which it is, has always suffered from a lesser than complex because it is very difficult to create a test and control situation for an individual's well-being. It's very difficult to have measures that are beyond self-reported when the entire practice is still completely dependent on self-reported. Um, and so it hasn't been taken seriously. That doesn't mean it's not important.
Right.
Similarly, brand is hard to measure. It can be measured, but because it can't be measured does not mean it's not important. And I think if nothing else, having that in companion with this notion of brand needing to be managed as a business asset at the executive and board level, and then trying to measure so that you can start to have the data set, and frankly start with a data set that the decades of research, and I'm now talking decades, have demonstrated, if not causally, at least in a correlated manner, are early predictors of future business success. You start there. um, and it's okay not to have it certain, but it's better to start measuring and have it be in all other category than to not try to measure at all because you're not sure it's going to be 100% accurate.
Yeah, I think the starting sooner than later is important because you're collecting data at
And you
whatever
need
level,
it.
and you have to have something to compare to from the start to the finish. And hey, we were at this level when we started anything else. Just like psychology and everything else, it's all about application.
It is.
right? You can have this if you, the thing is everyone gets put into a box and they're gonna like, I'm a shrink, I'm working with people on the couch and whatever that is, but like, how do you not apply this to business and consumer decision and everything else? And once you focus on that, you will find these measuring tools, right? You'll
You
see the
will.
patterns, right? And consistencies and things like that with this. And that's how you begin to build a trackable system for that particular application.
Yeah, and I will go and point to any data set that a company is already using had to start somewhere,
Right.
right? If you're thinking about measuring cash flow, a lot of folks end up having some blind spots in the expense bucket because
Right.
maybe the employees are not tracking it appropriately, or they're not tagging it to the right category, or there's some kind of obscuring of the data, even though it seems like a hard number. Over time, it gets better because you put different processes in place.
Mhm.
Over time, your ability to understand what does that mean to our future success gets better because you start to improve the data models you have that are using these data points. Nothing that you do for year one is going to be good enough, but you still have to start because in year
Right.
five, it will be so much better. And by year 10, it might actually be central to how you and your leaders or business management team make decisions. And
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
it's true and it will happen because I have 25 years of this.
Yeah, it's really with business I work on, I'm like, I need that 3 year. If you can give me 3 years of data, like we can do some stuff,
So, what's
you know.
interesting about that is you have to have both, in my opinion.
Mhm.
So, I will always be the one that's looking past your 3 years because if I look past your 3 years, then I can understand what needs to happen in those 3 years. Because what happens in those 3 years has to both deliver on what your expectation is for a business growth in that time period. But as a brand as business manager, I have to then anticipate where you need to go in order to continue that kind of growth
Right.
past year three. And so it is like playing imaginary chess in your head, anticipating possible moves while you still recognize that to get there, you have to move the pieces one pawn at a time in order to then potentially win that chess game.
Yeah, it's awesome. That is awesome. Well, Kat, this has been the best brand podcast I've had. Okay. So
Yay.
this is just deep dive, a lot of takeaways on this, a lot of, actionable items, which is really important. I'm really encouraged that the audience has been able to take this understanding of brand now and really think about their business in that capacity, separate it from marketing. It's
Yes.
got to be separated from marketing. If you don't know anything else, understand that. And I've seen it do seminars and I speak and do all this stuff with me, and it's all mixed up. So
Hmm.
I love to see the clarity coming through here on this, and even more so, putting hard numbers to it.
Yeah.
Let's make it an asset. Let's add to the valuation of a business, because we all want our businesses to sell for more when the time comes, right? So what are the avenues we can go down to increase the valuation of our business? We know a lot of the basics, but this is one that is so overlooked,
It is.
and just I love the clarity you brought to all this. So that being said, how can people follow you, get in touch if they want to
Sure.
get you on the
Yeah.
payroll, whatever it takes?
Well, would love to have conversations with folks. A couple of places you can come and find me on my Substack, either by searching my name, which is Cat Holt, Holt, cat with a C, or Brand is Business, which is the name of that thought leadership platform. There's a lot of good stuff that is going to be there very shortly. You can also find me on LinkedIn. More than welcome to DM me. The only thing I ask is please don't sell me anything.
Yeah.
So if you want to talk about
Well,
brand, if you want to do a
then how can they do
theoretical,
that on LinkedIn? Who does that? All
oh
they do is sell
Lord,
you.
it's
Oh, it's the
turned
worst.
into my
It's
spam
oh,
inbox.
it's just the worst. It's the worst.
Yeah, so love
Yeah.
having conversations, folks. Love talking business with people. I don't want to be sold to. And then I also have a website, which is www.coologee.com. That's COOLOGEE.com. So those are the three great ways. Don't judge my website. It's always a work in progress. Cobbler's kids. We don't have any shoes, but we're working hard on trying to make some improvements there too.
Awesome, awesome. Well, that is just all that is great. This has been such an awesome
Yeah, it's been fun.
conversation.
Thank you for
Yeah,
having me.
you bet. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule, helping these others with their brand. And let's just big takeaway: brand as an asset. Just put that in your head for your business. Let that be the big thing, and then connect with Cat so you can get more great information, maybe some help really developing that to increase the valuation of your business and grow your business. All of that. And for everybody else, thank you. And we'll see you on the next STS podcast. Thanks for joining me on the Sharpen the Spear podcast. If you're a manufacturing executive and you're serious about unlocking hidden profit, improving frontline leadership, and taking control of your floor, go to grit2lead.com right now. Run the free Sharpened Impact Simulator and discover your biggest opportunities are hiding. Don't leave millions on the table. Sharpen your spear, lead from the front, and win the floor. Until next time, stay sharp.